No risk it, no biscuit.
Coming from the Arizona desert, presented by SBNation.com. For Arizona Cardinals fans, by Arizona Cardinals fans, with outsider and insider's perspective, this is Revenge of the Birds. Good evening, everybody. This is Revenge of the Birds Radio. This is your host, Jess Root, and on the line I've got Ben on the other line. How are you doing tonight, Ben?
Hey, Jess. Doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's a happy Tuesday night as we join the show, as we start the show again tonight after an Arizona Cardinals win on Sunday, a 27-13 victory over the Atlanta Falcons. And we're going to be talking about some of the key things that happened in the win. Is that there was definitely plenty of good things to talk about. They stopped the losing streak. They evened their record. They head into the bye, so that we get a week off to kind of get healthy, hopefully, and to kind of reset before the second half of the schedule starts. And so, what we have. The Arizona Cardinals head into the game, 3-4 Cardinals against the 2-4 Falcons. Both teams kind of, heading into the game, at least in my opinion, it felt like the game that would determine who is, it was almost an elimination game, I would say. An elimination game from really any sort of playoff hopes at all, and the losing team basically getting bumped from really any sort of conversation into that. And that's what was most impressive to me, is that the Cardinals in a setting where it would have been really quite easy to let a Falcons team that, don't get me wrong, with the injuries, they still have some talent, but to see a banged-up team come in and steal a win and really kind of potentially put the season into its tailspin, and it was great to see the team bounce back, especially after what had happened on Thursday Night Football a week and a half before, because it was just last season that the Thursday Night Football game was really kind of the beginning of a downward spiral. It was when sort of everything kind of fell apart, with the magic of those first four games wore off, and the clock struck midnight, and the carriage turned back into a pumpkin, and everything, and the Cardinals were exposed for who they were, a bad offensive team with a terrible offensive line, and from there, everything just got terrible. And they bounced back, and they really had and while not defense, they were great, and offensively, they did something we haven't seen them do for a long time, and that is run the ball. But we've got Ben on the line. Seth Cox also now joined us. Seth, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good, Jess. How are you doing?
Well, great to have both of you guys on tonight on the show. And we could go ahead and get started. Just initial takeaways. Ben, what are your initial takeaways, just impressions that you got from that win on Sunday?
Well, they really kind of needed a win, and they got it. So I'm happy with it. It was good to see the offense working the way that kind of the fans have been thinking that it should for the last 2 or 3 years. Run the ball, try not to turn it over, just kind of control the clock and trust your defense. They did that, and it worked out really, really well.
And what about you, Seth? What were your initial thoughts, just feelings coming out of that game, just initially?
I was just so happy that they didn't let Carson Palmer throw it enough to screw it up. So I was very happy with the game plan overall, running the ball, letting Palmer make big plays down the field, but limiting the amount of times he was doing it. So I know some people have called it kind of boring, but it was kind of what I've been wanting to see all along from this team.
And we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about Carson Palmer and kind of the game plan, whether it was by design or if it was by situation simply because of how the game went. But we're going to talk about that because after the game, I was curious on a few things, and I looked up a couple of things, and I found a couple of really interesting stats that may or may not, and a comparison as well. So coming out of that game, aside from the big win, 4-4 heading into the bye, there is just a different feeling. The Cardinals were in the exact same place a year ago. They were 4-4 after 8 games. But the feeling was one of, oh my gosh, what has happened to this team? And that's, of course, because they had lost 4 in a row after starting the year off with 4 straight wins. And for me now, looking at the rest of the year, it's amazing what just one game against a banged-up, disappointing Falcons team can do. Now, we'll have to take a look. The Cardinals have really taken advantage of their schedule against the NFC South. They went 3-1. They lost handily to the Saints, but took care of business against the Panthers and the Buccaneers and the Falcons, and so they took care of that division 3-1. There's nothing to be ashamed of in that against that division. But what's amazing is my feeling going into that game after those 2 losses in the division against the 49ers and the Seahawks was really, oh my gosh, they're really pretty much, I was almost ready to write them off. And I said in the last week, not the preview, but the last time we were all of us were on the air, was that the Cardinals over the next 4 games at minimum need to get 3 wins and really need to get all 4, truthfully. And I still feel that way. But after that win, you just feel like, hey, this is at least possible. They're going to stick around in this. What did you guys think? Do you think that after that win, did it make you feel any different that maybe they can stick around in this postseason hunt? What do you think, Seth?
I was kind of with you. I wanted to see 3 of 4 in this 4-game stretch, and I'm still kind of there. I think it's it was a kind of, like you said, a must-win, but also a kind of had to win just based upon the Falcons and how diminished they were. And that's not taking anything away from what the Cardinals did, but just how diminished they were on both sides of the ball. And you can't lose home games that you're favored in if you want to be a playoff contender. And they didn't just protect home field. They really controlled the game, other than a fluke, pass interference call on Tyrann Mathieu. That was a really bad call, and that led to a touchdown. That the defense was completely dominant, and the offense did enough not to screw anything up, and that's what you want to see going up against a team that is as bad as Atlanta is.
And Ben, what did you think? What is your feeling at this point? Are they still kind of in it, or do you still see them as an outsider, as an exception, that they're not quite there? I kind of get the feeling that they might be able to do this.
I kind of think that they can, but when you look at Atlanta as a 2-win team, I feel like I'm getting a little bit too excited for maybe something that I shouldn't. It's funny how good the Cardinals have been outside of the NFC West, and how bad they've been within it. And I think that's probably going to be their downfall when we get to the end of the season. I think they'll probably miss out just because they can't seem to beat the Rams or the Niners or the Seahawks. But they're still in it, and it's shaping up to be a pretty good season. It's one worth following this year so far, which is more than we can say about the last couple. I had a bad feeling going into this game because the defense had just given up 60-some points in 2 games, and Atlanta with Matt Ryan was still a little bit of a scare. So it was good to see them shut them down as thoroughly as they did, and it was definitely the kind of performance that makes you think that this is a real team. This we're going to be a threat every week.
The kind of the biggest story I think coming out of Sunday's game was the coming out party, or really the banging, not just coming out, but banging the door down performance by Andre Ellington. We've seen flashes of it earlier in the season with big plays here and there, just making all sorts of plays. But But he didn't just walk through that door and say hello. He knocked it down, and he stomped on it. 15 carries, 154 yards rushing. He had a couple of catches, but the big one was the 80-yard touchdown run, just breathtaking. And that wasn't the only big one, but that was the huge one, the one-play drive. It really kind of set the tone for the rest of the game. And he also had a 22-yard run. He had a 12-yard scamper. He was every bit the dynamic player. If you couldn't have scripted, honestly, you couldn't have scripted a better game plan for Andre Ellington. He ended up touching the ball 17 times. He got about 35 snaps and 17 touches, and that was, if you could have drawn up a game plan, that was exactly it. So you got to see really dynamic play. You did see him run between the tackles. In fact, the big one was a play between the tackles that he eventually bounced out. But it just, how impressed were you guys and how impressed and how surprised were you by that performance? There in the press box, you always had this energy about Ellington's going to do something. When he did it, you're like, wow. But it honestly wasn't a surprise. You're like, we've been waiting for that to happen all year. What's your take on that, Ben? How impressive to you was what Ellington did?
I think we've been waiting on it longer than a year. The last even big single run I can remember from the Cardinals was Hightower back in 2009 against the Saints, 2010. It's been a long time. So I don't know. It was just a blast to watch. Yeah, I was surprised that he went off for as much as he did. I really didn't expect a big home run, 80-yard dash to the end zone. But it was so much fun to see. It's not something we've gotten to see much the last couple of years. It was a lot of fun.
What about you, Seth?
Well, I mean, as you know, Jess, I wrote about this in July, and I thought Ellington was the guy for this team. I thought he was the best running back for this team, and he kind of validated what I said at the early about it, and his ability to hit home runs and his ability to not only run outside but run between the tackles if need be is what this team needed. And he's kind of a different runner than Mendenhall in that he's as shifty as he is, he's still very north and south, and he follows his blocks and he makes the cuts and he's gone, and as opposed to Mendenhall and his hunt and peck type of thing. So this is what I've been waiting to see, and I'm not expecting 10 yards a carry. But as I said on Twitter, you take out that 80-yard run, and he still goes for 14 for 74, which is 5.5 yards per carry, which is still fantastic, and that's kind of what I expected from him.
Well, and for me, the difference is that you saw the same type of big play capability from Lord Stevens Howling. Just a little bit smaller. He was smaller. He was lighter, but. And he had like last year, I believe he had 200-yard rushing games, 100-yard plus. And on a side note, Patrick Peterson kind of had a couple of head scratching comments after the game. One is I wasn't quite sure what to make it of Patrick Peterson. It was the first 100-yard rushing performance that I've been a part of since he's been here, 2011, 2012, 2013, and while. I'm thinking, well, is he talking about because he's been in the offense this year? That's the first time, because obviously he forgot the 200-yard rushing performances by Lerod a year ago, and the two that Beanie had in 2011, including the franchise record that he set against the Rams. But I saw a lot of what Lerod Stevens Howling could do, only there weren't the negative plays. I think I was scanning through the game log, and I think I counted just out of those 15 carries, there was one negative play, and that was the one he fumbled on and recovered. And so there was one negative play out of all that, out of his carries, which is really impressive. And it's the one thing we haven't seen in a long time is that over the last 3 years, we've just seen negative carry, and then bust out, 5 yards. Now, not only did we get the big play, but we also got the little gains, and it wasn't zero gains, and they weren't negative gains.
Yeah, and it's just a different, running style than what we've seen here. He's very much, like I said, a more north and south guy. Even as a, quote unquote scat back, he does a lot more, into the pile than you would expect. So, I mean, like I said, he's a really basic runner in his running style, but his qualities about him are what make him special. He can cut on a dime and make that one cut and go, and then if he's one-on-one with a linebacker or even a defensive back, he's likely going to make that guy look silly. And so he's not going to run over a lot of people. He's not going to, even with the good speed he has, he's not necessarily going to run by a ton of people, but he has the ability to break off long runs. He has long speed, which a lot of guys don't have. Even Beanie Wells had good 20-yard bursts. He just would get caught from behind, and Ellington kind of maintains that 4-5 speed all the way down the field. You saw that on that 80-yard run. Guys would kind of catch up, and then they'd be gassed, and he'd still be going the same speed. So it's refreshing, I guess, is the best way to put it.
The long speed is really what's been a surprise to me with Ellington, because he ran a 4.5, 4.6 40, and he doesn't have the breakaway speed for the NFL, but clearly he does.
Well, and in fairness to him, he was nursing a hamstring injury at the time. Sean just tweeted me a really good stat when it comes to the big plays. Take the 80-yard run away. So he's got, in the Atlanta game alone, he had 4 runs. He had, an 80-yarder, a 22-yarder, a 19-yarder, and a 12-yarder. All 4 of those, which are greater than the 3 longest runs by Rashard Mendenhall, and Rashard's done 11 yards 3 times this season. So he hit the home run. Bruce Arians talked about is that kind of one of the things that Ellington's got. He's not only got he's fast. He's going to run by people, and he's going to run. It is his ability to run away. He said he's got lots of different speeds, and so it's not. If I could compare, if we look at Alphonso Smith, he has one speed once it gets going, and it's straight ahead, and it's if there's a hole, great, and if not, it just ends. He's got one speed. He goes from slow to super fast, and that's it. While Ellington has the change of direction and got different speeds to be able to move around people, run past, and then run away from people, which is really impressive. And now, the issue coming in, we also had good play from Stephon Taylor. Truthfully, when I looked at the stat sheet, though, at the end of the game, I was like, what? He had 3, he had a 15-yarder, he had a 9-yarder early in the first half, he had a 5-yarder later. He ended the game with 14 carries, 38 yards, which is yard per carry, it's 2.7. People were talking about the play of Stephon Taylor, and you saw flashes of it early. How impressed were you guys by Stephon's play? Admittedly, I was like, wow, he's having a great game. But then again, the stat sheet was not terribly impressive. He had the first 3 carries. Well, those 3 carries went for 29 yards, and then the next 11, or of the other 11, went for 10. Or 9 yards, which was very Steven Jackson numbers based on the game.
I went back and I took out the carries on the after the last 5 minutes or whatever it was. I think it was 6 carries for 5 yards. So basically, he ran. It was 8 or 7 carries. So he ran 8 times for 32 yards, basically. 4 yards per carry. when it wasn't at the end of the game, they were stacking the box type thing, which is, I mean, basically what he was in college, except the difference in college was, he's not going up against elite NFL athletes, so he was able, his not so sudden burst through the hole didn't, he was able to get that extra half yard every carry. So this wasn't super unexpected, and it's kind of what you want from him. 4 yards and a cloud of dust, that's kind of what he is. So you're going to get, some 8-yard runs, and then you'll get some 2-yard runs, and you'll get a 10-yard run, you'll get a bunch of 1-yard runs. So it's just, I think that's what we wanted to see from him, and it's similar to Rashad. It's just a different version of it. So I think we're more okay with it.
Before Ben, you go. I was going to say that exact same thing. It's like when I looked at the stats, like, oh, it's Rashard Mendenhall, but younger. and so I was like, it's just he did literally. By the end of the game, it was literally Bruce Arians said it on Mondays that Stephon took Rashard's carries, and so it kind of like the game plan is they're going to split carries. And Stephon had those 14 carries and produced basically what Rashard would have done. But because you saw the 2 or 3 really good runs, including the one where he continues to move the pile, keeps those legs churning, you're like, yeah, we kind of like that. Ben, what were you going to say?
Well, I was happy with how Taylor ran. As you guys were saying, he was obviously a little bit more effective in the first part of the game where it wasn't a guaranteed running situation, but that's about normal. So that was pretty much fine. The one run, there's a slow mo clip of it up on AZ Cardinals, I think. that was pretty exciting to watch. He for filling in for Mendenhall, to me he kind of makes Mendenhall. I'm not even going to say kind of. To me, he makes Mendenhall expendable. As you said, he was doing the exact same job. He came up with pretty much statistically it was the same performance that we've come to expect from Mendenhall. And if you just need a guy in to power through a couple tough runs at the end of a game against like an 8 or a 9-man box, then yeah, that's fine. He seems to work well enough for that. So it was a good performance, I thought, overall.
Nobody needs Rashard Mendenhall.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so we've definitely got Seth's take on this. So assuming Rashard Mendenhall comes back when he's healthy, and Bruce Arians said it on Monday, he's going to have to evaluate the situation. But once Rashard is 100% healthy, and I think the play of Stephon Taylor to show that he was going to produce more or less at least what Rashard did, allows him the luxury to tell Rashard, hey, get healthy, because one of the things that Bruce said is very telling about the type of player he is. He's going to try and play no matter what. And I think as what we're seeing is that toe injury that he sustained earlier in the season has really been taking a toll on him, but he's just continued to grind it out. And Bruce said Rashard would have played if it were up to him. He would have been out there playing on it. And BA, in part because he wanted to give Ellington more touches and probably because he wanted to give Stephon some look, he said to Rashard, no, I'm sitting you. That was his decision to do it. And now he's got the luxury of being able to lean on a guy in Stephon Taylor to make those carries and let Rashard get truly 100%. And when that happens, he sees Rashard stepping right back into that role. If you're Seth, I know what you're going to say. As we said, nobody needs Rashard Mendenhall. Would you, and do you think Bruce Arians, once he gets healthy, should he step back in, or should we just continue to ride the Stephon train for the heavy carries?
There's really no reason not to play Mendenhall, and I'm actually okay with it. I joke about it and things like that, but it's going to, whether you run Mendenhall or Taylor, it's going to be a similar result. You're going to get 3.5 to 4.5 yards per carry, more towards that 4 yards per carry mark, and for me, if you're going to get similar results, you always go with the younger guy. And that's what that's what I think you really should do. But it's Arians, and he's already shown that he's stubbornly loyal, and so he's likely, as soon as Mendenhall's 100% healthy, in his words, is going to go back to Mendenhall kind of as the starter / power back, and Ellington will continue to get his 15 to 20 touches a game, and everybody will be I don't know if we'll get back to the free Ellington hashtag, but I think we'll be maybe going to the free Taylor hashtag.
Ben, what's your take?
Yeah, I'm not going to Twitter to start a cut Mendenhall campaign or anything, but I'm fine with it if that's what happens. As far as going back to him, I don't. Pretty much with Steph, I don't really see much of a reason to. I expect similar results from he and Taylor, and I think Taylor being younger, being a little bit more fresh, he's got a little more of a bounce in his step. I feel like this is probably not accurate at all, but it seemed like he broke more tackles in that one run than Mendenhall has broken all year.
And for me, I'm willing to give Richard the benefit of the doubt, at least in the last few games, because he's been playing on a bad toe. It was when the injury first happened, it wasn't quite turf toe, but it was awful close. And from what we know about toe injuries, that can be, turf toe in particular, that's not just, I stubbed my toe. That's an extremely painful thing. Now, I'm going to take a little bit. I'm going to say I'm going to lean towards BA on this. But there's one caveat. I'm actually very supportive of the idea of Richard Mendenhall if he's completely healthy, that he steps back in and takes the carries that Steph had on the weekend. And because I think there is great value in having a veteran guy who's going to put up, consistently okay numbers, who has had success, who's been in the league, especially if the team late in the year is in the playoff hunt. And I think having that veteran presence on the field as a leader who's been there and done that granted, we saw in college, Stephon didn't shy away, that the game didn't get too big for him, as evidenced in the Pac-12 championship game. But that way you can lean on a guy who's going to give you production, and you don't have to rely on the young player who may or may not have those young yips that you can get in games, or those, for lack of a better, those mental things, whether it be a fumble, whether it be this. I would like a healthy Richard Mendenhall. I think he's going to be a huge benefit to the team late in the year, if in fact they're still in the playoff. If it's out of reach, then yes, sit Richard, give Stephen and Andre all the carries. I'm perfectly okay with that. Now,
I think that's part of the issue with Mendenhall at this point in his career, though. He really hasn't been healthy for 2-3 seasons now, and it's always something different. But you get to that point, like we saw with Beanie, it's just always something. At least that's how it seems.
And that's fair. That's fair. He hasn't been, but I'm going to point to last year's situation when John Skelton got hurt in week 1 and he had the ankle injury, and then Kevin Cobb came in and was playing, a average play, but good enough to hold where people considered him the starter, and it allowed Ken Wisenhunt to say, his ankle's not 100%. When John himself said that his ankle probably won't be 100% until he completely rested, meaning in the off season. And by Arian saying until he's 100% healthy, meaning as long as we're getting production from the two younger backs and there's a lingering anything, he can say that he's not 100%. A lot of times, at what point, players generally aren't 100%. That's just going to be how it's going to be. But it gives him that wiggle room to say, well, if Steph keeps playing, you can say, well, Richard's not quite there. He's at 90% or he's at 85%, and I kind of like that. There was a question I just got from Sean. It was from another Twitter. Didn't BA flip on Ellington? I thought I remembered him saying Andre Ellington could be a 3-down back. Now, that's actually something I don't remember. Do you guys remember here? I don't remember him ever saying that Ellington could be a 3-down back. I remember him saying about running backs in general, he likes to ride one guy. And I actually had a theory on the whole Ellington. While we talked about, well, why isn't Rashard Mendenhall getting more carries since he's more effective when he gets the 20 touches a game? And I think going into the season, BA had that in full intent, but things changed because Ellington would play and flash as much as he did. He fully intended on using Rashard Mendenhall as the workhorse, only the play of Ellington made it so he couldn't keep him off the field, and so he ends up doing something that he's never done before, and that's split carries. I don't recall personally ever hearing him say that he thought that Ellington was a 3-down back, just that he wants his running backs to be a 3-down back instead of a platoon situation. Or oddly enough, when they bring Alphonso Smith in as a 3rd-down back, that almost goes completely against what Arians has done, and I think that's just been a situation of personnel.
Yeah, and I don't remember any flip on the Ellington yet, so I admittedly don't listen to a ton of Arizona sports talk radio anymore, so it's hard for me to say if that was on one of the radio shows. Then I probably missed it, but Ellington's going to have to kind of prove himself by attrition. So if he can continue to play well and continue to take 15 to 20 touches a game and stay healthy and stuff, then I think probably, if they're fortunate enough to make the playoffs, then he might see his role increase in the playoffs, and if not, then he'll see his role increased in 2014. So I think that's kind of BA's way. It's kind of outside of Tyrann. He really hasn't thrown the rookies to the wolves. He's been very selective on how he uses them, so I don't really see it changing at this point.
Honestly, I don't either. Ben, did you have anything else on the running backs?
No, pretty happy with how they've been using Ellington. Obviously, 15 carries seems to be effective, so I'm fine with that. Just stick with it, I guess.
And so what that allowed to do, they ran the ball between the two running backs. They ran the ball 29 times, something we haven't seen the Cardinals do in a while. And that's a good. If your team is running the ball almost 30 times a game, guess what? You're winning. That's what we saw from the Seahawks. We saw from the 49ers. And Carson Palmer's, his play, yes, he did have the inexplicable interception, which was, oh my gosh, why did he do that? It was a very, very dumb decision. But end of the game, numbers look not bad. He's 13 of 18 for 172 yards. He throws the 2 touchdowns, sacked 3 times, threw the 1 pick. QB rating of 116, and that is in large part to the yards per attempt. In 18 passing attempts, he gets 172 yards. So right there, just under 10 yards an attempt. That's good stuff. And I was very interested, and I didn't get to ask. I actually was going to ask him this question, and I was talking to Bobby Massey when Carson went into the conference room, and so I missed Carson's presser, unfortunately. So I didn't get to ask him this, but I wondered, when was the last time I was going to ask you, Carson, do you remember the last time you've ever had to throw that little a game? And so I didn't get to ask, so I looked up his game logs. And I look back, he has 18 pass attempts. That is the lowest passing attempt total he has had in his entire career in a game he played the entire time. Going back, the last time he threw that few passes, and I'm gonna exclude Week 15 of last year when he completed his 3 passes and then was injured. But we have to go back to 2009. And in 2009, Week 16, In a 37-0 loss to the Jets, he attempted only 11 passes, completing only one. However, that was JT Sullivan ended up coming into the game for that after that. And what I put out there is basically Carson Palmer turned into Alex Smith. And I wasn't saying that's a bad thing. I was just finding that very interesting, and perhaps the most impressive win that we've seen this year, in the most impressive performance offensively, did not come on the shoulders of Carson Palmer slinging the ball around all over the place like Bruce Arians likes to do it. It was with 30 carries in the running game and 18 pass attempts. Another stat. And I was wondering, well, Carson Palmer has it done. Let's look at Bruce Arians. Has he ever had a quarterback, or has he ever had a game where there were less or 18 pass attempts or less? And I looked back. 18 pass attempts going back to last year with Indianapolis, back with Pittsburgh, and back with Cleveland. I had to go all the way back to 2001 when I believe it was Tim Couch threw 18 passes. And that might have been combined, Couch and Holcomb in the game combined for 18 pass attempts. So not only is this remarkable because they carried the ball 30 times, but Bruce Arians is in uncharted territory when it comes to offense like that. And Carson Palmer had never thrown that little. Bruce Arians hadn't never called that. I mean, this is really uncharted. There was a couple times there were a couple of low 20s, but never 18. Does Bruce Arians need to rethink his philosophy for this year? And then I throw this out there. The Cardinals never would have gotten Alex Smith because it would have required a trade, and there wasn't any way in the world that the 49ers were going to trade Alex Smith to the Cardinals. But if we had gone a different direction, how different would this team look? Let's toss that over to you, Ben.
Well, Palmer's a little different than Alex Smith. He actually throws to wide receivers, so there's that, right? Yeah, to me, it's just how the Cardinals are built. You don't want these tackles in pass protection 30, 40, 50 times a game. It's just not going to work out. And obviously, you get behind and you feel compelled to throw it. But if they can limit Palmer to 18 throws every game, I'll be very happy with that. I just don't trust him at this point. And maybe he ends the year on a solid note, and this feeling of doom I have every time he drops back to pass will fade. But for now, I think this is probably going to be a more successful game plan for them. They have the defense, and the line is. I can't say the line is built to run. I don't know what the line is built to do right now. It's so piecemeal at this point. It's just anything they can get out of them.
The line is barely built at all.
Yeah, it's just hanging on. So. But I think we've kind of felt that the Cardinals have been built this way for a couple of years now, where they should be a run-first team, but they just haven't done it. They just haven't committed to that. So we'll see. We'll see if they change that philosophy going forward or not.
Now, Seth, you've been ringing the bell, you've been calling out to the world about the BA scheme and how perhaps it's been some of the problems offensively. Do you look at this game and use this as further fuel to the fire of what you've been saying?
Well, it's not necessarily fuel to the fire as much as it's kind of dumbing down what he does and just lessening it. You look at the throws Palmer made on Sunday, and you only had 9 passing attempts. So half of his passes, mind you, but 9 passing attempts greater than 10 yards. But he completed 5 of them, and he threw 2 touchdowns in that range. That's those chunk plays. Yeah, it's only 5, and it's not the 20-plus yard bombs. But you know what? You're kind of making do with what you have at this time, and I think that was more my point than anything. Is you don't really have a quarterback that's built to run the system, because you don't have the offensive line that's built to block the system. So, you either have to have a quarterback that can move like a Luck or a Big Ben, or, kind of probably the prototype that you would want to see in this offense would be like a Cam Newton. But then you also have to, and if you don't have that, if you have a guy in Palmer who can maneuver within the pocket, but if there's not a pocket, there's nowhere for him to maneuver, then, you need to change what you're doing. And like I said, the 9 pass attempts of over 10 yards, completing 5 of them, both touchdowns, went, over 10 yards in the air. That's kind of, it's kind of a lesser version of the chunk play offense that Arians wants to run, but it was also a much more efficient and effective, and, didn't throw any other than the one dumb interception, but, didn't turn the ball over, protected the ball, and really took a lot of pressure off your defense for the first time in, pretty much the whole season.
So do you guys think that with that and Arians talked about a little bit in his press conference on Monday, is leaning on the guys. He's actually very pleased with the talent and the performance of his running backs. Do you think that maybe with the play on Sunday that can be a springboard and actually turn this team into the 2011 49ers? For lack of a better comparison, to turn them into what the 49ers were. And truthfully, this is exactly the way they played on Sunday. Was exactly for the past 2 seasons that the defense wanted the offense to be just enough, just efficient enough to not screw things up, not turn the ball over. It kind of turned it into that situation. Do you guys think that perhaps we might see more of this down the stretch, or if this was simply an example of going up against a team that simply was just overmatched because of injuries and just couldn't pull it together, especially after that back-breaking long run by Ellington?
Well, I think if you look at the schedule going forward, until you get to Indy, you really, and I mean, that's only 2 games away, but that's really kind of what you're going to be going up against the next couple weeks. You're having teams that, struggle on offense. The Chiefs kind of laid out the blueprint on how to beat the Texans with Case Keenum at quarterback. So you don't necessarily have to have the quote-unquote high-powered or high-octane or whatever Arians likes to call his offense. You don't have to have that. All you need is an offense that doesn't turn the ball over and that allows your defense to keep you in games. And, it's not fun, it's not necessarily sexy, but at the end of the day, if you can find a way to get into the playoffs, is anybody really going to say, well, the offense sucked, but we made the playoffs? So, nobody's going to complain about that. Everybody's going to be ecstatic that this was a competitive football team all season.
Well, and if you take a quarterback like Alex Smith, what has he, over the last 3 seasons that he's played, what is the only thing that he's done? Win games. And it hasn't been pretty. And he gets a lot of flack for being just the guy that doesn't screw it up. But he's won 8 in a row this year. He was having a fantastic year last year. He played extremely well in 2011. And even made play. I mean, down the stretch in 2011, he was making more plays. If you can look all the way back to that New Orleans game in the playoffs, so he had some big time throws. And so it's not a bad way to play football. It's just you don't. So it's not typically championship football, but it keeps you in the hunt, and it keeps you in the ability to be there. Ben, what you got?
I think the schedule. I think we're going to go back to passing it just all over the place, even though it's been to the team's detriment so far, because that's just how Arians is, and that's how he's been. Like you said, you had to go back to 2001 to find one game where he called a game that had 18 or fewer passes. So I think it's pretty much inevitable that we'll go return to that. But against Houston and Jacksonville, we probably won't need to. Hopefully, if those guys are putting up big time points on us the way they're built right now, then we really have some issues that I didn't know about. But yeah, after those couple of weeks, I think we're gonna see some more passing again, and that'll probably be, well, we'll see how it works out then.
The thing is, and this is just kind of how I always view. I mean, I view the Chiefs in the same light, and it's not a bad thing. And I'd be happy to, and we kind of do have a team similar to the Chiefs, maybe a dumbed down version a little bit. But you may not be a Super Bowl contender. You may be a quarterback away, and this team's more than a quarterback away because unless you get that special quarterback that can maneuver in the pocket, then you have to figure out the offensive line or whoever you bring in is going to get killed. But they're good enough, like you said, Jess, to eke out wins because the defense is good enough to keep them in ball games. So you want to kind of take away what it was that you brought Carson Palmer in to do. And I know Arians, and like Ben said, he probably won't do it, but and it's against everything Arians believes in as an offensive, mind. But you kind of want to take away everything you wanted to do with Carson Palmer and just say, okay, I'm going to ask you to throw the ball 3 or 4 times down the field into tight windows. But the rest of the game, make smart reads, make smart throws, don't turn the ball over. We have a great punter. We have really good special teams. We're going to win the field position battle. And then you guys can make plays, on short fields and let Jay Feely kick as many field goals as we need until we win the game. And there's, it's not necessarily a Super Bowl winning philosophy, but you know what? It's better than the alternative. And so at this point, I think you got to go with what works, and that's just me.
Now, moving on to a bit with the whole Carson Palmer thing, we'll have to watch in the weeks to go if we can see if we can limit Palmer to the low 20s or if he's going to go back to the 30 plus. I mean, if you look at Matt Ryan, oh my goodness, he threw 61 times and 4 picks. I wanted to talk a little about B. Massey. That's not very important, but what I want to move on to and to have you guys know, we were planning on doing some mid-season grades in comparison. We can push that into next week as we have a bye week. We won't have a game to talk about next Tuesday, and we can actually prepare for our grades and mid-season awards, that type of thing. Let's talk about the defense. The defense apparently has Matt Ryan's number. Matt Ryan has now thrown 9 interceptions in the last 2 games, and he did get the 1 touchdown pass late in the game. After a questionable call at that, but his numbers are really not good against the Cardinals. He's got 1 touchdown, 9 interceptions in the last 2 games, but if you look at it, he has 67 career interceptions for his entire career. 9 of those are against the Arizona Cardinals in the regular season, which is really something. Which defense do we have? Now, in some ways, the defense was not fantastic, but they really did a good job of limiting Tony Gonzalez. One of the keys of the game that Sean wrote for us is that if Tony Gonzalez scores, the Cardinals lose. Every time that a tight end has scored this season, the Cardinals lose. Every time that a tight end has not scored, they win. They held Tony Gonzalez to 3 catches. Harry Douglas had a very, very, very quiet 12 catches for 121 yards. I was like, what? After I looked at the stat sheet, because it was as quiet 120-yard reception, 121-yard game could be. He threw for 301 yards, Matt Ryan did, but had the 4 interceptions. And they had the ball for a long. They led in time of possession. They ran 83 plays, but they just didn't do anything where they had the awful turnovers. And this is on the heels of giving up over 30 points in the previous 2 games. What are we to get? What defense is this? Is this the run-stuffing machine that we saw against everyone except San Francisco? and Seattle, and is that more testament to their running game, or just the fact that the Cardinals' defense isn't quite there? What are we to think about this defense? What do you think, Ben? How is it the defense we saw against the NFC West guys? They gave up 24 to. They've given up on all three NFC West games over 30 points in all three games, and in all the other games they've looked great except for New Orleans. What type of defense is this? Like, how good is it?
Again, it's amazing how good they've been outside of their division and how bad they've been within it. I think it's too soon to tell. I think I can pretty safely say it's a good defense, but not an elite defense right now. They need to be better on third down. You know, they have been really good against the run, except for San Fran, which has always been a team that's really built to run the ball down your throat no matter what you do. But so is Seattle, at least the last couple of years. So it's I think it's just too soon to tell exactly. I think statistically they're right in the middle of just about every category, and that's fine. You know, they're doing a good job with turnovers, I think, because, well, knowing how many times our offense turns it over, the fact that the team is +1, and that right now means that the defense is certainly doing their job in that department. They definitely need to buckle down a little bit, I think, especially within these division matchups, because the 30-point games that we keep having, our offense, okay, maybe they'll score 25, 27, but apparently that's it, you know. So we need a little bit more from them at times, and obviously the turnovers don't help anything. But, you know, every team's going to turn the ball over. Not every team has the second interception leader in the league at quarterback, but every team's going to turn the ball over. You just have to deal with it. Like Arian says, just kick somebody's butt and get off the field, you know, and obviously they kicked Matt Ryan's butt. But Matt, by the way, was having just about, I would say, the best season of his career coming into this game. So and the offensive line is pretty good too. So it was impressive that they were able to do that to him and shut him down like they did. But I don't know overall what we have right now. If they give up another, you know, 30 points to Seattle and San Fran again, then it's going to be trouble.
What's your take on this defense, Seth?
I think it's better than what the statistics say. I think it gets a lot of they give up a lot of tired yards, and I know that's making an excuse, and really there's no excuse for it in general. But if you watch the games, and you know the games they lose, it seems like they're on the field more than in the games they win, and that's kind of, you know, the philosophy of this team. You can't leave this defense on the field all game, and you know, especially when you're giving up short fields to them consistently, and Seattle's able to get 6 points quickly, you know, and just things like that you can't do. So I think they're better than what some of the stats say. You know, against the run, they're just really good. Seattle or San Francisco, Seattle too, they both wore them down just by grinding it out and, you know, taking their time to do things. The thing that's been missing until this last game, and this last game still wasn't that great at it. I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but they're not sustaining long drives to really give the defensive rest. This week they had a lot of drives that happened because the defense made plays, but until the third quarter, their longest drive was 6 plays. I mean, so now you go into the third quarter and they had a 7-play drive, an 8-play drive, a 9-play drive, a 10-play drive, and then an 11-play drive to end the game. I mean, that's what you want from your offense. And then, oh, excuse me, I was looking at that wrong. They had an 8-play drive and then 2 7-play drives to end the game. Whereas, you know, in the first half they had a couple 6-play drives. They had the 1-play drive, which was a touchdown, and even though they scored a touchdown, that's only 13 seconds that your defense is off the field. Now, obviously, you're never going to get points back, but that means they have to go right back out there and perform again. And this week they did. So it's, you know, it's hard, but I think that they're better than what some of the stats show.
Now, you guys talking about time of possession, found it interesting. I just pulled up some game logs, and I'm looking at the Cardinals. It's been about half. So week 1, they lose. They had the ball 28.5 minutes, so they lose time of possession. Week 2, they defeat the Lions. They win time of possession, 31 minutes. They lose to the Saints. They win time of possession. The one game that they had control of time of possession wise was against Tampa, and then they had 34 minutes they held the ball. But against San Francisco, 28 minutes. It was fairly even. Then against Seattle. Oh wait, which one am I looking at? So Panthers. So they won the game against the Panthers, losing time of possession. Then the next 2 weeks against Seattle and San Francisco, they won time of possession. This offense is really kind of interesting, and the goal is to score a point per minute of possession, and they met that this week. They had 25 minutes, or 40, almost 26 minutes of time of possession, and they got scored 27 points. This team really isn't, and this offense isn't really built to control the time of possession, but rather be efficient in it. But looking at the defense, it's just really, I'm not quite sure of it. It's a really good defense that doesn't always get off the field. Atlanta was 8 of 20, 40% on third down. They give up yards in the passing game, and so but they wouldn't think that they've done better. They've done better. They've done overall this year. Aside from the tight end big plays that they've had, they've really limited plays down the field, and so they do give up some yards, and they give up long plays. Atlanta had 79 offensive plays. Give up 13 points, and they had so many plays. This defense, I'm going to go with it's very good, but it isn't great or elite yet. There are definitely still some interesting flaws, one being the ability to cover the tight end, the other being that they don't always get off the field on third down, and that they can't stop. And they had their two teams that just couldn't do much. They couldn't stop the running game. They've been really good about stopping the run otherwise, but the two teams that they really need to stop the run against, Seattle and San Francisco, they couldn't do it, and so they're still just a notch below the best defenses, and I think they still have to prove that.
Well, and part of the problem, Jess, to kind of piggyback off what you're saying is, you can win the time of possession battle, but when you're the second highest team in terms of percentage of your drives that end in turnovers, and the only team that's higher is the New York Giants, and you're the 22nd rated offense in scoring touchdowns or scoring points, so only 30% of your drives end up in points scored. That's where the problem persists, and it kind of lends itself to that old Carson Palmer is a good quarterback between the 20s and then struggles once he gets inside the 20, and I don't know if that's true or not, but the stats kind of back that up a little bit when you hear something like that they're one of the 11 worst teams in the NFL in scoring points, but they're the number 2 team in giving the ball away to end their possession.
And yeah, I completely agree with that. And so we've got a couple of good games coming up. We got the bye, so not only do they get better, so they can get heals, particular, Larry Fitzgerald, let's get that hamstring healed. They're going to be at home against Houston. Very winnable game. Not a game to overlook, obviously, but definitely a game that they should take care of business. They go on the road to Jacksonville. Jacksonville is terrible. I don't let's not hope that they are not that ignominious one win that Jacksonville pulls out, and then they come back home to play Indy. That's a good set of games, especially with the first two, and if they can kind of build some identity heading into that game against Indy, if they can get on a roll, rattle off 3 games in a row. I mean, the team, the players, they shouldn't start stacking wins in their head, but that's what we can do as fans and as analysts. We can start stacking wins in our head. Let's look ahead and can they be 6-4 going to that Indy game? Very much into the thick of things. And so that's what we got coming up. Now, we're coming to the end of our show for the night. We've talked about the running back situation. We've talked about Carson Palmer. We talked about the defense. We're going to hold off on... I'm not going to worry too much. I'm going to write it there. I'm going to have a piece up on RevengeOfTheBirds.com, and it will be about Bobby Massey. I've got some more stuff on the running back situation. We got our picks coming up in the next couple of days. So for all you listeners, head on over to RevengeOfTheBirds.com. If you aren't already a reader there, please read our stuff. If my stuff isn't your favorite, that's fine. Be sure to read Sean's stuff, Ben's stuff, Seth's stuff. They've got some great analyses out there. And we'll be back next week. We have no game to preview this week, so we won't have no preview show on Thursday. We will be back next Tuesday night, as we always are, and we will talk about mid-season awards, mid-season grades, looking forward, and then maybe we'll have a little bit of the looking ahead to the draft. And I will just not talk about that because I know I don't really look at anything come to the draft until right before the draft, and I've read everything that Seth has to say, and then I'll let him and Ben kind of take over in that part. Seth, Ben, thanks for coming on again tonight, as always. Anything you'd like to say before we sign off?
It was fun. Night, everybody.
Thanks for having us on, Jess. We appreciate it.
Great. Thanks for having us on. On behalf of that's Seth, and that's Ben, and I am your host, Jess Root, for Revenge of the Birds Radio. We'll be back again next week. In the meantime, find us on Twitter, find us on Facebook, and visit RevengeOfTheBirds.com. You've been listening to Revenge of the Birds. Keep the conversation going by visiting RevengeOfTheBirds.com. Follow us on Twitter at Revenge of Birds. You can also find us on iTunes at Facebook.com/Revenge of the Birds.